Okay, so let's take some of these to the marketplace. Of course, the big story around the Monetary Policy Committee. Yesterday, the equity market finished off flat, just as the news was coming in of that 0.5 haircut in headline interest rates. Let's go to Temple Ashaju, business correspondent at the Stock Exchange. Our studios in downtown Lagos is giving us a roundup of the market, not just on the equity side, but the unlisted securities as well as the fixed income. Temple, good morning. Coming here onto the show. Okay, it's good to have you. So let's take a bit of a wrap-up of where the market was on this MPC decision day.
So, well, there were a couple of reasons why the market ended with a bearish bias yesterday, as 0.01% in terms of the key benchmark indices yesterday, which you technically want to describe as being flat, but was down some 0.01% to 31,038.86 points. But if you look at the equity capitalization, that rose some 0.82%, and that was as a result of the listing of the rights issue of Lafarge PLC, which took place yesterday in the market. Some 7.434 billion ordinary shares of Lafarge was listed in the market yesterday, and that then shot up the fully paid up ordinary shares of that company from some 8.6 billion to 6.10 billion or thereabouts yesterday in the market. So that pushed up the equity capitalization, adding some 94.97 billion naira to the equity capitalization yesterday in the market. And of course, the gains that we eventually saw in the markets, which moderated the losses that would have dominated the markets yesterday, came toward the close of the market, and that was about the same time that the Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele was actually delivering the considerations and decision of the MPC in the market, which tells you that a lot of some investors were actually trailing the direction of the MPC yesterday in the market. So we expect that today we should feel the impact of the 50 basis point reduction in the MPR in the market, especially on the banking names, because the banking sector yesterday was one of the major drags in the market, coupled with the losses that we saw in the consumer goods segment of the market. But basically, yesterday, activity level was weak. Eventually, we saw some 15% decline in the volume of transaction, as well as a 55% decline in the value of transaction, which all came in at some 3,457 deals. If you look at the top trade segment of the market, FBN Holdings blazed the trail there, was up in terms of share price some 0.61%, did some 29 million units of its shares worth some 243 million naira yesterday in the market. For the market breadth was negative. We've got some 20 losers, led by Wema Bank PLC, which was down some 6.25%, and the gainers were just 18, and that was led by some 9.6% gains that we saw on Cadbury PLC. So if you look at the sectoral front, the consumer goods segment of the market, as I said earlier, was down 0.54%. Nigerian breweries continues to tailspin, was down yesterday 3.6%. PZ fell 2.8%. Nestle was flat 0.01%, was a negative bias yesterday. The banking segment of the market had Wema Bank, Eco Bank, of course, Union Bank as well. UBA was also down, some profits taken there, down some 0.64%. And we saw Guarantee Trust Bank also ending in the negative territory, all impacting the banking segment of the market. For the oil and gas segment of the markets, we saw gains in 11 PLC and, of course, O&O. These two companies were the major firms that drove up the performance of that indices yesterday in the market. Etana PLC on its own side was down, actually, but that wasn't able to outweigh the gains that we saw in these other companies. Industrial goods segment of the market, Dangote Cement made some recovery, up some 0.8% rather, as well as the gains that we saw in insurance segment of the market, which was up some 0.87%. As I said earlier, energy market, we didn't see much playing out there, except for the gains that we saw in 11 PLC. Some 89,202 units of its shares traded for a positive of 170 naira, moving away from 167 naira it has been trading at before now. O&O also jumped on 1.79% after we saw some 1.51 million units of its shares trading there. Other segments, other companies were really no movements. SNR PLC did some 2.08% decline. But for the unlisted securities markets, we saw a bit of a downward movement there, some 0.54% decline in the index, which closed some at 751.32 with a market capitalization of 539.77 billion naira. In terms of the volume, we had just 105,000 units done, valued at some 21.2 million naira. But if we take a look at the fixed income market, in terms of the bond segment of the market, they traded quite flat yesterday. It was on a quiet note. We saw a slight demand toward the close of the market around the 23rd February 2028 security, which eventually saw some contraction, closing at some 14.25% yesterday in the market. Eventually, we saw bids strengthening around the 2023 security, which is still the mid-end of the curve there. But yields relatively closed flat yesterday, as the DMO is expected to carry out 100 billion naira worth of transaction today in the market. Some 5, 7, and 10-year securities expected to be opened in the market today for investors who are looking to take position in that segment. But generally, on the deals, on the bond side of things, we had some deals, 20 deals yesterday, valued at a total of 7.43 billion naira. For the treasury bill side of the market, that side of the market was also flat, where you got tight system liquidity constraining the buy interest in the market. Of course, we know that some investors are also awaiting the DMO primary market auction that will be taking place here today, where a lot of investors are expecting the rates to reduce further. And of course, because of the 50 basis points decline or reduction that we saw in the interest rate yesterday in the market. So, but yesterday in the T-bills, we saw a slight uptick in yields at the mid, the long end of the curve as well. But the CBN's halt of OMO auction and, of course, the MPR that was reduced yesterday is also expected to impact the market performance today, Bosun.
Okay. Tempo, a very nice way to give us that, all that happened yesterday. Of course, the highlights, as it were, for our viewers here and around the world to understand how the market went yesterday. So let's come back after the break, Temple, and chat for a few minutes, a bit more on the what you're hearing on the street around the MPC surprise court yesterday. Let's chat to a few minutes after that. Stand by, Temple Ashaju from the Stock Exchange studio, downtown Lagos. We'll be back in 2 minutes.